you mentioned where it's a text message, it just says hello. They're just hoping that you will reply, and then they will engage you in conversation, and eventually they'll get around to making you some kind of an offer or asking you for information. But when you get these random texts, just like the phishing emails that we see so much, just discard it or block it, but do not reply to it. So let's talk about some other defensive measures that we can take for phishing. The bad guys are trying to trick us into doing something that we wouldn't otherwise do. For example, wiring money somewhere. And they're very good at it. Our parents taught us to trust people, and the scammers are trying to take advantage of our trusting nature. In the case of the SIR scam that we just talked about, they use several different techniques to gain our trust. One red flag to note is that they contacted us. We didn't contact them. Secondly, they pretend to be an authority figure like a big sir. And they say this is an urgent situation. It has to be resolved very soon. They want to convey that sense of urgency to get an emotional, to increase our emotional response. And eventually, they will ask us to send money. It could be in many different contexts. It's probably not going to be in the initial contact, but maybe in a second or third. And when they ask for the money, it will probably be through a method that legitimate businesses rarely use for payment transactions. For example, the wire transfer in this case. Gift card numbers are another big one. Cryptocurrency like Ethereum or Bitcoin. Venmo and Zelle are peer-to-peer methods. When you hear a request from a Venmo or Zelle, that's probably another scam. Or an envelope full of cash. Probably don't want to follow up on that one. Just disconnect from such a scheme. So someone earlier asked about an example of an email that is phishing. And here's one. I haven't seen the one in the branch attack, but this is similar to the kind that we receive every day in our email inbox. You'll notice at the top, the text says that my Facebook password has been hacked. And in order to reinstate my account, I should either complete the attached form or click on the link below. Sounds pretty legit, right? But there are some red flags that you can see in this email. Most importantly, the sender's name here is Facebook support right up at the top. But the sender's actual email address is not from facebook.com. It's from aiken.olotiong.co.uk. And clearly that is not Facebook. So this is the first thing that we should check when we get an email. Make sure it's really from the email address that matches up to the name. Now, this email address may not be visible on a mobile device like a phone or a tablet. So if in doubt, set that email aside until you can check it out on your computer. The mobile devices have kind of a smaller screen size, so they're not able to present everything to you this way. But check it out. Don't reply to it. Scammers can even spoof the email address itself. So check out any clickable links. And for example, if you mouse over that link that says your Facebook profile, it causes the real internet address of where you're going to go when you click that link to appear at the bottom of the screen. So again, this is not a Facebook website. It's http deviate dot something. And similarly, like the earlier one, you can't do this on a phone or a tablet. So if in doubt, set that email aside until you can check it out on a computer. And lastly, you'll notice that there's an attachment, which is a zip file, which may be hazardous unless you really know what it is. So if you see these red flags, it's probably a scam, and your best approach is to just discard it. Passwords. These can be a real pain, especially on a website that requires a special symbol in the password. So let's talk about the difference between weak passwords and strong ones, because this can make a huge difference in the security of your own personal world. Here's a little story about what happens when you use an easy to remember password. Last summer, I got an email from my friend Tom asking if I could do him a favor and buy some gift cards for him and send the numbers to a different email address. He'd pay me back when he got into town. Does this scam sound familiar? Yeah, there's a lot of it going around. Well, Tom had an easy to remember email password, and that enabled a scammer to get into his email account. And then the scammer sent that email from Tom's email account to everyone in his address book. So it looked like the email came from Tom because it came from his account. Well, Tom didn't even know that a scammer was sharing his email account until I contacted him. I got one of those emails. He called his email provider and tried to get control of his account back, but he couldn't prove to them that he was the real owner of the account. And in the end, the email provider left the account in the control of the scammer, and Tom had to start an altogether new email account. What a mess. And then it got worse. He got phone calls from two of his friends. They had bought the gift cards just as he'd asked, and they had sent the number to that other email account. So they were wondering when Tom would reimburse them for the cards. Well, Tom was understandably embarrassed that he had allowed his friends to be defrauded, and he wanted to notify everyone in his address book about the scam. But meanwhile, the scammer had deleted his address book, so he didn't even have his friends' email addresses anymore. Fortunately, this didn't go into complete identity theft, but the whole mess happened because Tom had an easy to remember but weak password. So what makes a password strong rather than weak? Today, a password should be at least 12 characters long. So how about the word hypothetically as a password? It has 14 characters, which seems long enough. But automated word list searches make it possible to guess this dictionary word almost instantly, just like that. How about substituting numbers and symbols for letters, like in the second example? In that example, I substituted 0 for O, slashes for the A, and ones for L's, making it 15 characters long. Does that help? No, not at all, because the bad guys aren't trying to crack your password manually. They have programs that do it for them. And their automated word lists for cracking passwords already include these character substitutions. So this password would also be cracked almost instantly. Well, how about that third example, completely random characters and special symbols? This 8-character password could be cracked in about 40 minutes. Better than instantly, but really not good enough. That's why I suggest that you need at least 12. The best approach is to use a passphrase. Like in the fourth example, correct horse battery staple is 25 characters long, 4 words. And that would take decades to crack. And it's easy to type correct horse battery staple. You could type that much more easily than you could that random 8 characters above it. Of course, many websites require that you use a capital letter, a number, a special symbol. So the last example there incorporates those. So you take the basic idea of the passphrase and add the capital letters or special symbols that that particular website requires. So seriously, consider using passphrases like this to protect your accounts. So how about using the same password for different accounts? Well, remember my friend Tom, whose friends got scammed because he used a weak password? Tom made another mistake. He used the same password on other accounts, including his bank account. So now the scammer had not only access to his email address and all his friends, he had access to Tom's bank account. When he told me this, I drove Tom to the bank. He couldn't drive anymore. And we got that fixed at his bank before the scammer could empty his account. So using a password in 2 places is a bad idea. For another reason, servers are frequently breached, and someone mentioned that they often get exposed to scammers, and those customer passwords become available to the bad guys. In recent years, the passwords for Facebook, Yahoo, many other sites have been stolen. So if you have an account on one of these sites that was compromised, the bad guys now have your password. And if you reuse the password elsewhere, they have all they need to take over that account as well. So don't reuse passwords. Many websites encourage you to use single sign-on using Facebook or Google or Apple or Amazon. And this seems convenient, but it is yet another way that companies track you across different websites, privacy problem there, and then sell your information. So not a good idea, especially since if the bad guys breach one of those sites, which happens pretty frequently, they have your password for multiple sites, not just one. So avoid using single sign-on. It's a little more time-consuming, but create a unique account for every site that you visit. So what do we do with all those unique passwords that we've created? Before we consider where to store the passwords, let's think first about to whom the passwords are at risk. Criminals out on the internet or criminals in your house? Well, obviously, the criminals on the internet are a much bigger threat than someone who's broken into your house. So that gives us some direction on how to store and where to store passwords. How about a file in your computer, maybe a Word document or a spreadsheet? Well, if a bad guy out on the internet is able to hack into your computer, he now has all your passwords. How about a sheet of paper in your desk drawer? Well, that's actually more secure because the bad guys on the internet cannot see into your desk drawer. But there's an even better solution, a password manager. Password managers can generate a strong password or a passphrase. It can store that password in an encrypted vault. It can automatically fill that long password into your login screen and log you in. And this makes it both easier and more secure. And I listed on the slide some examples of companies that create password managers. There are many good ones, and all of them are better than no password manager. Finally, have you heard about passkeys? They're a way to finally eliminate passwords. Hooray! By using a cryptographic token. This is just getting underway, but many websites, big ones like Google, Facebook, and so on, have made passkeys available, but the rollout is just getting underway. So where do you store these passkeys? In a password manager. So go ahead and get started with a password manager now. And as the passkeys become more and more available, we'll be able to get rid of passwords finally. And it's going to make our lives a lot easier. So get started with that password manager. Now, even if you don't recognize the term two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, you're actually already using it. When you go to your ATM and you put in the card, you also put in a PIN number, which is a kind of second factor. When a website sends you a 6-digit code in a text message or an email, that's another second factor. It's important to use two-factor authentication anytime you log into an account that you care about, particularly your email, your financial accounts, and so on. And you can see 3 examples of ways to do two-factor authentication on the slide. Microsoft did a study of all the email accounts that got taken over by the bad guys. And 99.9% of all the compromised accounts used only a password, no second factor. In other words, two-factor authentication blocked 99.9% of all password hacks. 99.9%. So if you have an account with anything of value, use two-factor authentication on it. Text message, authenticator app, code, or a hardware key. So far we've talked about ways in which to avoid fraud at your branch and on your own devices. And I want to thank you for joining in today because you are the guys that will make the difference in reducing fraud. And I especially encourage you to share what you've learned with your SIR branches BEC, with your fellow SIRs, and with your family members. So now it's your turn. And if you have a question, you can type it into the chat as we did before using the chat icon at the bottom of the screen, or use the raise hand feature, which is either an icon at the bottom of your screen or a button under the react icon, also at the bottom. If you're on a mobile device, you may have to touch the bottom of the screen for the icons to appear. Derek will relay your question from the chat, or he'll call on you if you've used the raise hand feature. And when he calls on you to speak, you can unmute by either clicking the audio icon in your Zoom session or pressing the space bar on your keyboard. So I will stop the share now. And Derek will start with the questions, and hopefully I'll be able to give some answers.
Okay, we've got a whole bunch of questions in this second part. But let's start off with Lon, who's got his hand raised.
Thank you. Very good presentation, Alan. From your experience, Alan, oh, can you hear me, Alan?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. From your experience, what type of a profile are these criminals, and where do they mostly reside? Out of country, if there's any study on that you can speak to? Is there one country more than others? And are any of these criminals ever caught? That's the end of my questions.
Yeah, thanks. Those are good questions, Lon. They're from all over the world. There are criminals in the US that are doing this. The majority do come from overseas. And of course, that makes it harder to reach out and arrest them, even when you know where they are. There are even scammers that are themselves victims of criminals. They've been in human trafficking situations, and then they're put into these boiler rooms, and they're sending us these scam texts and emails. So it's a big business. It's international in scope. When it comes to collecting money from an individual, that's when it particularly gets back to the US. For example, they'll have a person who's a native speaker to talk to you on the phone so that it kind of builds your confidence in them. But it's a very large international criminal organization, multiple organizations. As for targeting, most of the scam phishing that we see is not targeted at all. They're just splattering it out there to some list of email addresses or text phone numbers. Occasionally, when they have information, for example, they know who is the big sir and the treasurer of a SIR branch, then they can employ spear phishing. And this is where high-profile people get a lot of attacks, particularly from nation states. North Korea makes a lot of its actual hard currency through running scams over the internet. Pretty amazing. Thanks for the question, Lon.
And we have Lynn with a question.
Well, when you were saying beware of Zelle, so are you worried about, or is it okay to receive money from other people, or it works both ways?
Right. Zelle is a person-to-person kind of financial transaction. It has direct access into your bank account. So when you use Zelle or other P2P kinds of programs or apps on your phone, be sure you know the person that you're dealing with. Don't do Zelle with a stranger.
I was talking the other night with a fellow that was a banker, and he said that he thought that because Zelle was put together by the banks, that they had, I mean, that's how somebody just puts in your phone number and knows how to send money to you, but that they had also made it pretty secure. So you're kind of throwing a monkey wrench into that.
Well, maybe from the banker's viewpoint, it's just dandy, but the scammers will use Zelle on occasion. So the key thing here is to know the person that you're dealing with. If it's somebody that you've never met, don't use Zelle with them.
Would getting money through PayPal be a better way to do it?
I would, more businesses do use PayPal. So yes, I think that's more, could be trusted more. But again, be sure you know who you're really dealing with, because the scammers may use PayPal as well.
Okay.
PayPal is the equivalent of a debit card. And so it has all the protections or lack thereof of a debit card as opposed to a credit card.
Yeah, and that's a good point. There's a substantial difference between a debit card and a credit card. They look the same in your wallet, but when you use a credit card, there are rules, laws, and protections that make it easier to get your money back if somebody scammed you through a credit card.
Right.
If you got scammed through a debit card, there are no such protections. You may be lucky and get and claw back the money from your bank account because it's gone from your bank account as soon as that transaction is done. You may be able to get it back, but it will definitely be more time consuming and difficult.
Well, you're kind of looking and you're assuming that whether it's through Zelle or PayPal, that it's the money might be coming in blind, and that PayPal or Zelle, then knows where to direct that without the sender, for instance, being able to access that information. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just say again, know who you're doing the exchange with, and don't buy into the idea that, for example, I got this deposit for $2,000. All you have to do is give me 200, and you'll get the rest of the 2,000. Well, when you give up your 200, you're not going to see the rest of the 2,000. Next question.
And we have Jim Gragg. Jim, you'll have to unmute. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Alan. Great job. I keep hearing about these huge databases that are getting hacked, like Ticketmaster recently was hacked. And they say that all of this critical information of names and addresses and other information is ending up on the dark web. And people are actually going onto this dark web and bidding for these stolen databases. How do we look at the dark web? How do we check the dark web to find out if our name is in one of these data files?
The dark web is sort of a broad term for websites that criminals use. They're typically not searchable in the normal way that you could Google a website and find it with a domain name. So the short answer is that you're probably not going to get direct access to that information, because it really should be protected. And the way the criminals access this is that they are recommended by some other criminal friend. So you're going to have to go into criminal enterprise, Jim, to get the right associations to get you introduced to the dark web. But I wouldn't go down that path. One of the things that you can do is go to a website that's called Have I Been Pwned? Pwned. Just Google Have I Been Pwned? Pwned, and that will bring up a list of websites like Ticketmaster that have been compromised. And you can put in information like your email address or password to see whether that shows up in the list of compromised databases.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, we've got a lot of chat questions have been asked, and it's getting to be a problem to actually sort them out and try and classify them. But let me see if I can find a common one. One sec, let me do that. I go up to somebody who asked them earlier on. Can a sender's email address be spoofed?
Yes, a sender's email address can be spoofed. So you might get an email from Derek Southern's that appears to have Derek Southern's, it does have Derek Southern's email address in it. There are tools that enable the scammers to do that. So, yeah.
Okay, a comment here is you might want to mention you shouldn't call a phone number on a suspicious email. You should always look up the number on the company's website.
Good advice. If somebody calls you up saying they're from your bank and your bank account's been compromised, disregard anything that they have written there. Call up your bank at the number you know. If it's your credit card company, look at the back of the credit card and use that number. Do not call the number that they provide in the email or the text or the phone call.
If it's your bank, go into the local branch in person.
Better yet, go in person. Right.
Rather than call. And even better yet, have a banker there you know.
Okay, talking of passphrases, Alan,
Yes.
does a passphrase need to be nonsensical, or could it be a line of poetry that you can remember easily?
I recommend not using something you can remember easily. Remember my friend Tom, who had the easy to remember password. Now, I hear what you're saying, that maybe a line of poetry is obscure enough, but the tools that are, particularly AI tools that are being developed, are becoming increasingly sophisticated to where if it's something that's been published, it's more likely that you're gonna that passphrase could be breached. I mean, if you used a password like 7 years ago, that's probably not going to be secure. So, in terms of passphrase, try to use random words. A passphrase, a password manager will generate 4 random words to use in a passphrase. And really, if you use a password manager, you don't have to think about this stuff anymore. You create the password, you store it in the password manager, and it will log you in no matter what the passphrase is.
Somebody was asking for a recommendation of a password manager. Do you have a specific one you like, or are they all good?
I'd say they're all good. I use Bitwarden. But any one you use is a good one. They each have different user interface. 1Password, Dashlane. If you're an Apple person, use Keychain. They're all good.
Okay, let's have a look again here. People are asking, can we get your slides? And is this recording going to be put up somewhere where it's available? And the answer is yes, I believe.
Yes, it is. We are recording it, and we will have the slides and the recorded presentation available on the surinc.org website.
Great. How safe are browsers to save passwords?
Oh, good question. They're improving, but they are not as good as a real password manager. The browsers call their password saving process password manager. And the difference is they may or may not be encrypted. All real separate third-party password managers are encrypted, and you must have the master password to get to it. However, not all web browser password storage works that way. So, for example, you might, if a bad guy gets into your computer, he can go in and find the passwords that were stored in your web browser. So I recommend that you switch from that approach to using a real password manager where they are encrypted and stored securely.
Yeah, if you don't do that, somebody says, I have an iPhone, is it safe to list my passwords in notes? And somebody else has said, if your iPhone is locked when idle, is your iPhone locked when idle, requiring an unlock code? Is the notes file password protected, both of which can be done? The list of password is locked via iPhone passcode. Would you like to comment on that?
I'm not familiar enough with the notes feature of the iPhone to be authoritative on that one. But I'm guessing that it's similar to the situation of storing passwords in a spreadsheet or a Word document, which is less secure than storing it in a real password manager. Now, in your iPhone, you have a keychain, and that's the place to store those passwords.
Okay. Your next question. Well, actually, it's a promotion for AARP Fraud Watch. There's a podcast from AARP called The Perfect Scam. And Charlie Guthrie says that's an excellent source of information.
Yeah, Charlie's right. That conference that I mentioned that I attended last week was sponsored by AARP Fraud Watch, and I've been working with AARP Fraud Watch for years. They're an excellent resource, and if you go to aarp.org/fraudwatch, you'll get lots of good resources there, including the access to The Perfect Scam. The Perfect Scam is a podcast, and you can pick it up on any device. I think they make a new one every couple of weeks, but it's really insightful. They talk about the new scams and how people have responded to them and how criminals do get caught. It's an interesting podcast. So check out The Perfect Scam.
And Mike Corker has got a question about two-factor authentication. How do you install it?
Well, it depends on the particular website that you're using. Each one seems to be a little different. So in many cases, there's nothing to install. Let's say that your website sends you a text message as the second factor. That might be a 6-digit code or thereabouts, maybe longer. And when you log in, the first thing they do is send you that code to your cell phone. You look at your cell phone, find that code, and then you type it into the website. That's a way to do it, but every website has its own unique methods. There are a more secure way, better than the text message or email code, is to use an authenticator app that's on your phone, and it generates a unique 6-digit code for that website every 30 seconds. So it's substantially more secure. And if you have a phone, either an iPhone or an Android, just go to the Play Store and type in Authenticator app, and you'll see there's many different ones available. So that's a second way, and that app you will have to install on your device. The third way, which is most secure, is a hardware key that you actually plug into your computer, and it has an encryption code baked into the key, and you may have to touch it. So it requires not just a logical code, but it has to have physical presence. So that's what makes it more secure.
Okay, Ken O'Connell and Charlie Guthrie both comment on security things like the password manager. Ken uses Keeper Security. He's been very satisfied, but it costs. You have to subscribe to it. But Charlie Guthrie is very happy with Bitwarden, and he comments, it's free.
Right. Each company has some different combination of services they will provide. As I mentioned, I use Bitwarden. It is free for, I think, 2 devices. I'm not sure, but each one, if you go to their website, they'll tell you the details. The more complex environment you want to use it in, the more devices you want to share it on, then you'll probably need to pay them some money. But if you need to pay, it's not a lot of bucks. Even if you don't go with a free one, they're relatively inexpensive.
Okay. There was somebody asking about, can phone calls be are phone numbers that are used by these people when they call you, are they real numbers? Somebody else says, as a comment, where the hell was this one? There must be 50 or so questions or more. He says it was publicized somewhere recently that you can get any phone number you like, or use any phone number you like. So I think that answers that question. The phone numbers can be false, or they can look like the local police or whatever.
Yeah, they can be spoofed. The FCC has been working on this problem for a long time and made some progress on it. But the bottom line is you can't rely on that phone number that shows up on caller ID to be real. I mean, I've gotten calls from myself, from my own phone number. And often they use that by putting the area code and the first 3 digits, the next 3 digits of your phone number as a way to make you think, oh, that's probably somebody nearby. I'll answer that one. Not necessarily. These days, it's just as well to let it go to voicemail. And then if you don't recognize that person, you can check the voicemail and pick it up from there.
Here's somebody who's been watching AI information. David Green says, can they record your voice and use it for future phishing?
Oh boy, yes. when I was at the fraud conference in DC, they did exactly that. They took the TED Talk that was done by an AARP staff person and sampled that and turned it into a video of something entirely different where she was saying things that she would never have said. So yes, AI is enabling a lot of that stuff. I read just a few days ago about somebody who clicked a link and there was Elon Musk in a video saying, I'm going to share with you a secret way to wealth. And this fella ended up sinking $600,000 into a scam. He was presented with a website that looked very real. He'd put in a little money, and then a couple days later, he'd see the chart going up, and his investment was looking good, and he kept putting more money in and more money in until the scammer just disappeared. So yes, it's entirely possible to have a video of a person doing something, saying something, doing something that they did not do.
Okay. Does DuckDuckGo provide some protection as opposed to Google?
DuckDuckGo is better for privacy purposes. The difference is that when you type in information into a search in DuckDuckGo, that information is not shared with anybody. It's just kept private. Whereas when we type a search into Google, that information is captured, stored in a database, and sold to other vendors. And it's used to track you around the web and build a dossier essentially about you.
Okay, we've got just 2 or 3 more questions and 5 people have their hands up, which we'll get to in a moment. Most large hacks mean outfits like Sutto or AT&T provide 1-year protection through Kroll or other ID protection. You should receive an alert for any of your info on the dark web if you use one of those agencies.
Yeah, that's what they say. I've been, like most of us, my information has been breached, and I got that letter that says, oh, we're so sorry, but we're going to give you a year's free something protection. Well, my experience so far has been that those are pretty useless. They might tell you that some information has been stolen, but it's also, of course, after they're closing the barn door after the horse is gone. Something better than that I can suggest is freeze your credit. Go to your credit bureau. There are 3 major ones. Go to each one of them, freeze your credit. Most of us at this stage of life are not getting new credit anyway. So what this prevents is the bad guys going in and first learning about your financial situation, or worse yet, impersonating you. If it's frozen, they cannot do either. People get scammed all the time where somebody creates a bank account under somebody's name and then uses that for further fraud. So I strongly recommend freeze your credit with the credit agencies, and you can easily unlock it. If you need to buy a car and they need to check your credit, it's pretty straightforward to unlock it for that need and then lock it back up again. So freeze that credit. That's going to go be a big help in keeping you safe from the scammers.
Bruce Borgman, said he occasionally gets a text from somebody who says, hello, are you Steve? Is there any danger in replying? And Ken O'Connell says, yes, they can copy your response like yes, and with AI can use it to scam. I would think that's particularly on the phone. Never say yes to a question that you get.
Right. Regarding the text message about hello, discard it and block it. Do not respond. There's nothing good will come of responding there. And if you get a robocall, nothing good will come of answering yes or answering their questions on a robocall.
Okay, a comment from me. I've recently changed over to Apple. I've got a Mac Mini, and my keyboard has a little fingerprint button top right. How secure is that, Alan?
It's pretty secure. I mean, there's nothing that's 100%. Security is not a binary all or nothing kind of thing, but it's yet another tool in your kit. So it means that either you have to be there to press that fingerprint button, or somebody would have to be in your house at your keyboard to do some kind of simulation of your fingerprint. So that's pretty unlikely. So yeah, I'd say that's a good step forward.
Yeah, I think those sort of keyboards are available for PCs as well. Now to the people who've been very patiently waiting with their hands up, John Tucker in particular. Go for it, John.
Thank you. So, Alan, this is a follow-up to the Zelle and PayPal comment. I use Zelle all the time with family members because I know who they are, and we're sending money and back and forth usually monthly. But if somebody I didn't know came to me and said, just send that money by Zelle, I wouldn't do it because I don't know that person. And that's just an expansion on what Alan was already saying, but I know people get confused about that. But I only do it with people I really know and can talk to on the phone and confirm that it's them.
Good.
Thanks. Ken, branch 8. If you unmute, you can ask a question.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Great information and great presentation. Our Big Sur was scammed, and I got the email and I called him. He said, no, don't do anything. But I kept the link or whatever was sent to me, and then I sent it to the FBI in San Francisco. So that's just leading up to my question. Is there any national organization? Because I assume it went down a black hole because I never got a response. Is there any national organization that we as a SIR group could send all this stuff to get these criminals? Because I know a lot of people have been hurt by it. And the second question, follow up on Derek, was I have face recognition on my on a couple of accounts that I want to be sure is secure. So I assume that's the face recognition is pretty secure. And then if I can ask one more question, where the heck are you that you need a fireplace?
Well, I'll work in reverse order. I am in Vermont, and that was actually just a little background loop of my fireplace, but it is here in my house. My video's glitching out for some reason. I apologize for that. But anyway, yeah, I'm in Vermont. It's nice and cool here. Regarding the how to report and what to do if you've been scammed, there is an Internet Crime Complaint Center that is run by the FBI. And if you go to ic3.gov or just Google IC3 or Internet Crime Complaint Center. It'll get you there. So that is a place to report crime. The advantage there is that it is the FBI through that center creates trends on what are the latest scams that are coming down. Now, they will ask you in there to put in the number of the police report. So that's actually the first stop, is to report it to the police and get a report number, complaint number, whatever that's called. And then you can put that into the IC3 report. Now, you may feel like, okay, well, this stuff is kind of useless, but in addition to helping the FBI with trends, many states have restitution laws where if you're a victim of crime, you may receive back money from a fund that is built through clawing back money from criminals. So it could be to your own advantage as well to report to the police and report to the IC3. A second thing is, what do you do when you're feeling just so overwhelmed by having been the victim of a scam? The AARP Fraud Watch group does have a phone number. And if you, as I mentioned before, if you go to on your web browser, go to aarp.org/fraudwatch. That will also take you to other resources, including the phone number, where you can talk to a real human being about what's happened. And it's really very, it's very helpful. They have some great people on those helplines. And they also have a groups for peer-to-peer counseling and discussion for victims of fraud who can just kind of talk through this after the experience. So those are some resources you can use.
Okay, we also have Richard Blackborough there, branch 35, I think, Richard.
That's correct, yes. Mine is not a question, but a comment on a recent scam that I ran into that I'd not seen before, that my wife actually got the email from originally. And it was in the form of an invitation to a party. And, you know, we've seen many of these before. They're quite legitimate. You have an invitation, you click on a link, you find all the details of the party, and you say, I can come or I can't come or whatever. This one was from a friend of hers that she knew. And it said, open the invitation. And when you open the invitation, it brings up a pop-up that claims to be from the Adobe Document Cloud, inviting you to log in before you can see the invitation. Mm-hmm. And you can sign in with Outlook or AOL or Office or Yahoo or some other email address. And obviously, it's just a scam to harvest your login credentials for somewhere. But I thought it was quite clever and a bit more convincing than the usual scams that I'm used to seeing. Of course, when you look at it carefully, you find there's spelling mistake or there's sort of grammatical mistakes. For example, it says, NB, we believe your data belongs to you, so we only use it only to display your invite contents only. But, you know, it's at the bottom and you sort of don't get down there and perhaps don't read it before you do something stupid. I'd actually never heard of the Adobe Document Cloud. I suspect it might exist, but if you look at the email address, it goes to something called puffball.info, which obviously nothing to do with Adobe. So I was just putting this out as a warning to others. It's a new one to me. And when I Googled it, of course, it's been around a while, but new to us.
Okay, thank you. Anthony Ramirez, your hand is up. If you unmute, you can speak.
No, Anthony.
I was muted.
Yeah.
Okay, hi, thank you very much. Very useful and supportive service and information. I just wanted to share with you that our branch, I'm in branch 4, San Francisco of CSRS, and my good friend Bob Golton is treasurer, and I received an email from him requesting that I back him up for some gift cards for one of our projects. And I did a lot of the steps that you mentioned, checking. I knew it wasn't from him, and I did ignore it and just blocked it. But when I told him about it, he said I was the only one that had mentioned it to him. And I know that our branch has also been tapped. Our president's email has been used in the past. So I think it's happening consistently. Anyway, my word is, tell your persons that you've been connected to that this is happening, because they don't know it. Secondly, I use I just signed up for Apple Pay. I wanted to see what you thought of that as a tool. Thirdly, I use some foreign language words in my passwords, or I substitute numbers for certain words that fit, like 4 or 2, when I'm in the password, instead of using a number. I mean, instead of using the word, or I use a number. And I've received almost every other day, I receive a request for from someone who's going to give me a fortune, or who is going to has a charity that I want to support, and that sort of thing. And that was all I had, and I just support you and thank you very much for all this work you've done and keeping us going.
Oh, thanks, Anthony. Regarding Apple Pay, that's a fine, secure way to pay. Apple Pay, Google Pay, a number of those are well thought out and secure methods of payment.
Thank you.
Regarding substitutions, not a good idea. It doesn't really add any value, because the scammers already have those substitutions built into their software. When they're spinning through the many combinations of passwords, they're already using those substitutions, so they are really no help.
What about foreign language words? Words
Well,
from another language that I use.
If you use a passphrase that has multiple words, foreign language words would be fine. But using a single foreign language word that is in a foreign language dictionary is just as bad as using an English word that's in the dictionary.
Good. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, we have Roland Kleinman, if you'd like to.
Let's have a little bit of fun.
Yep. Hi. So
hi, Roland.
Hi there. Hey, not really a question, but just to kind of add on to some things that folks were asking about passwords on browsers and things like that. I really want to encourage folks that when if you've got passwords, if you've got apps on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer, but let's especially go with the mobile devices, right? So be extremely cautious. Like if you go to a coffee shop, if you get up and go, oh, I'm going to get a refill on my coffee, and you leave your phone or you leave your tablet on the table, it's so quick, so easy for somebody to come take it. That's why it's extremely important. Usually, if you're going to leave it, they have to be locked, right? Your phone has to have a lock that requires Face ID, a thumbprint, a passcode to unlock it. A lot of times your apps give you the convenience of not having to enter your password every time. So you could have an app, if somebody gets your phone, especially a banking app, where now they have access because they've got your phone in their possession, you haven't locked it, or they saw you unlock it, right? You got to be extremely cautious in today's day and age that, somebody can get a hold of your device and then it's off to the races. It's just like losing a wallet with credit cards in there. So be extremely cautious, protect those things, put locks on them. It may seem inconvenient at first, but it's a lot more inconvenient to have to try to, after the fact, go and contact your banks and all these kinds of things. So as far as, the password lockers, a thing is only as strong as the weakest link, right? So if you store your password somewhere and it's not secure, that's going to be a problem. So think about these kinds of things. Be cautious with the devices. Be cautious that, if you've got a laptop at home and you've got other family members that might have guests coming over, you really need to lock your computer so that somebody can't go and then all of a sudden log into your browser if your computer's not locked and access your bank account, because the password is being remembered. It's keeping you logged in. So and be extremely cautious if you ever get phone calls. Hey, this is your bank and we're having trouble with browsers, so can you give us your password so we can correct your issue, right? Never give anybody a password over the phone, over email, right? If somebody's contacting you asking for your password, be extremely cautious. I would suggest hanging up and calling the bank or calling the place directly with a phone number that you know that's on the back of your credit card, that's you find from the website, and find out, ask them, hey, what's going on? I got a phone call about something going on with my account. You'll see it all the time with text messages saying, hey, this is Amazon and there's an issue with your account. Click this link here and we'll get things straightened out. Don't click the links. Very rarely click any links that are coming to you in emails, and you can always, depending on what you're using, some browsers allow you to hover over a link and you can see what the real URL, the location that it's going to take you. So just some things to be cautious, be always diligent, be always suspicious. And anytime anybody asks you for something that sounds like it's a family member or if it's a person you work with, contact them through some other manner, right? To say, hey, call them up on the phone. Hey, I just got a text from you. I got an email from you saying you need this, you need that. What's going on?
Yeah, thank you, Roland. Really good advice on a lot of scores there. And in fact, I'm going to be coming to Roland's branch to talk about fraud and scams in November. And Derek and I were just this past week talking about how we need to make that kind of information more accessible at branches. Maybe I've done quite a few presentations like this one at branch luncheons. And so we were thinking, wouldn't it be good if we could have some guys that would be able to present at branch luncheons to share the information, because that's the critical thing, is just having some exposure and some understanding to scams. And so I'm going to challenge you guys. Would you be willing to do a presentation at a SIR luncheon if you had the information like slides and so on already available to you? I can do that, but I may not be within, I live in Folsom when I'm back in California, so I'm not exactly next door to all branches. And so if you would be willing to do that, maybe share at your branch or with other branches that are within driving distance. Hey, go to another branch, get a free lunch, give a presentation. Anyway, get in touch with me or with Derek, and let's see if we can make this happen and share the news with other branches.
Great. Thank you, Alan. I was going to say the same if you didn't. We've got two more people with comments or questions. And somebody has said we get to the end of the presentation time because we're getting some repetition. So after the second question, I don't think there'll be a lot more. So hang on there, chaps. We've got still got 124 people on, which is pretty damn good. Paul, if you unmute, please speak up.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
No, thank you. Branch 146, Walnut Creek. Great job, Alan. Very helpful. My question
Thank
is
you.
back to the storage of passwords, whether it's password manager, encrypted vault, passkey. What if I were to predecease my wife? How does she access this information?
Oh, good question, Paul.
Really good question.
So, as you have heard, I advocate using a password manager. And this is one of the pieces of information that you need to share with your wife or whoever would be the appropriate person if you get hit by a bus. I mean, there's quite a few things like that, financial related information and emergency medical stuff that you really need to pass on to a family member or some other trusted person. But the master password to your password manager is one of those things, because truly, if you don't know that master password to the password manager, you're not going to get in there. So good point, Paul. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Alan.
Andy, you're up.
Things to suggest, and then an example of a very clever scam.
Andy, we're having trouble hearing you. Can you come closer to the microphone?
Because I have internet issues.
That's still pretty bad. It's very unusual for you, Andy. I know that you're down in Silicon Valley where the technology is great, but you've got a crappy signal, right?
So maybe what I can do is to turn myself off here and increase my bandwidth. And if you still can't hear, then my comments aren't worth it.
That's much better, Andy.
Okay, but first, Alan and Derek, what you need to do is to edit this talk and make it available on the website. And then what we need to do is to get people comfortable using this at their branches, and they need to show this video or some edited version of it and act as a moderator for questions that go beyond the ones we've gotten here. You do not need to have an individual expert at every branch. You guys are doing a great job. Edit this one.
Good idea, Andy.
Second thing, relative to the comment on personal things, this is critical. It has almost something more to do with estate planning or some similar topic. And it doesn't apply, it applies here, but more broadly to your life as a whole. You need to have a file of all your critical information dealing with banking, dealing with stocks, dealing with estates and trusts. And you need to have this all explained. I don't know what's happening. Who's trying to share? Derek?
No, I don't know who this is.
Ken,
thank you for not sharing.
So this goes beyond this alone, but for people of our age, it's really critical that we have a file. That file needs to be shared with a child, not with your spouse or with your spouse and a child. It needs to be put in a safe deposit box, and somebody else needs to have access to it. It's beyond the conversation of this, but it's really important. I'm going to talk, Derek, Alan, you and I talked about the scam that occurred to us recently. I don't think you covered it. We recently had, for whatever reason, someone lock up our computer. And since we're sensitive and knowledgeable in computers, we knew that that was a bad thing to have happened. So we went to another device and we went to Google and we said, please, what is the telephone number of the Microsoft support? And up came a number, which was a telephone number for Microsoft support from Google. We called that number. That number took us directly to the person who had locked up our computer.
Oh, wow.
And so you think, oh, Google's a safe place to Google, to search for a number. What we learned later from Best Buy is that Google has removed, Microsoft has removed all online telephone call support for just this reason. So you can't even go to Google and search and expect it to be good, because AI has gotten incredibly powerful to the point where we got a false number to call what we thought was a safe site. So be careful. I don't know, maybe Alan, you're going to address that in a second. The second thing that happened was that when we got to this person, we thought we were talking to Microsoft, and they made some suggestions, and they brought up an HTML screen that looked just like my Fidelity account. I thought I was in Fidelity. And they said, oh, we made a mistake, they said, you've been scammed. Best Buy did a terrible job protecting you. And we're going to return your money for that service. And so we said what it was. And they said, oh, just type it into this form. Well, we started to type in the amount of money, and they added a couple of extra zeros at the end. And then they showed us on their HTML screen of our Fidelity account that amount. And they said, oh, we made a mistake. Could you back out that on your HTML, on your Fidelity account, and send us that money that we, by mistake, added to your account? Pretty clever, huh?
Yeah.
So the fundamental question is, who do you trust today? Now, let me back out of that. SIR is having a terrible time reaching people because we're all scared to death by this fraud. I got a number of phone calls and emails about this exact same Zoom. People said, is this a fraud or is this for real? Because you have personal relationships, and they trusted my answer. And I said, well, it's for real. You ought to go. We are so gun shy as a populace that we don't trust anybody anymore. And the question that I ask as a SIR officer is, how do we communicate with you if you won't read our emails? Thank you.
If I could just add to that. Now, hang on a minute. We've got John Duffy. Let's have John first.
Yeah, just real briefly, an invitation to Alan. I'm a member of Branch 112. We meet at the Rancho Cordova Elks Club just down the road from Folsom. So when you're back in Northern California, you can expect someone from our branch to invite you to be our luncheon speaker.
Okay, great. I look forward to it.
Yeah, the thing I was going to add was we've had quite a few examples where an officer in the company has died, and like a treasurer or secretary, and nobody knew the passwords on his computer. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very good idea that if you're an officer with rather important information that you're dealing with, you should either back it up somewhere safe and give somebody else the password so that if they get called to your house to try and discover stuff on your computer, they've got the password, they've got the access, and everything becomes okay. Does that sound sensible, Alan?
You bet.
Okay, let's see if there was a couple more. We've got a couple of people, Jack Reefer and Brad Stribling, are both volunteering to join the presentation group. I would add myself to that. Gordon Boutley says he received an email purporting to be from a SIR member asking for something then told me not to call him because he had laryngitis. Beware. So, Brad, you're up. But you've got to unmute.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to follow on the earlier comment. These fraudsters have become so sophisticated, as you know, they've gone to the next step to defraud it. In other words, after one is defrauded and panics and wants to go somewhere for help, they have invaded those help places and people. So I had a friend in my local church who is the chairman of our finance committee. He got scammed and his computer got hacked. And so he Googled for the Geek Squad. And Geek Squad is what, owned by Costco or something like that, or better, something like that. Anyway, so he Googled for them, got on with them. They took over his computer. They were the hacksters. They got everything from the computer, everything from his bank. So you can't even Google or search for who to go to help for, because those have been contaminated or invaded. So just a fair caution.
Yeah, go to the original website every time.
Yes.
Alan?
Well, I think we're, let's see, we're almost 2 hours into this. So I just encourage each of you guys to share what you've learned today with your family, with your fellow sirs. The stats show that just having heard about a particular scam, like the one that Brad just mentioned, makes you 80% more likely to avoid it. So please share what you learned with your friends, with your family, with your fellow sirs. And thank you all for showing up tonight.
Yeah, we've still got 108, which is a lot more than the most of the meetings we run here on Zoom. So I think it's a very good, very successful meeting, Alan. Thank you very much for putting the work in and doing it for us.
And thank you, Derek, for doing all the hard grunt work here on the organization of this.
But speaking as the Director of Marketing and Communications for SER, we're struggling in how do we reach out to the officers and BEC members at the branches. And if you have any suggestion how to do that, have we got to go back to snail mail? I'd appreciate hearing. Thank you.
Send money.
By the way, Andy, one of the suggestions I got, I talked to Constant Contact about that, and they suggest using a serinc.org address as the sender, because that is much more authentic. The only way you can get an address is through Alan, so it's much more likely to be real. And it also has authenticity to it adds authenticity to the email because it's coming from a well-documented and authenticated web address. Okay, if that's it, any final comments from anybody else?
Great presentation, Alan. Thank you very much. I'll be following up with you about the Area 4 branches.
Great, thank you.
Alan, one of the questions I had that I didn't ask was I had on the chat. Are there any plugins, WordPress plugins, that would mitigate hackers that you've had experience with? I think Jasper is one. I don't know about the others. I
haven't found any that really make a difference. I I believe in following best practices, and it's kind of like having an antivirus on your computer. It's helpful, but software can give you a false sense of security. So short answer, Ron, is no, I don't have a plugin that I recommend that's going to solve security problems.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, one question we did get from the branch that got taken for $1,200. Does Sir have any insurance which covers such losses? And Craig, our insurance chairman, is still here. I think he said, no way, Jose. The deductible is much higher than that, right, Craig?
That's right. We do not have any coverage for that. This is the first time that we've really heard about all this. We did send it to the agent, and the agent's advice was the biggest thing we can do is to implement multi-factor authentication, both for your computer and having internal checks when funds are released. There is coverage that's available. The cost for us would be somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 range, and the deductible would be somewhere between $2,500 and $5,000. So it isn't cheap. And of course, the one time we've been hacked here, it wouldn't have even come close to the deductible. So, but it's food for thought. But I think that 2-point identification or verification is minimal and key.
Right. Any final comments before I hit the end the meeting button?
Just a big thank you for putting it all together.
Thank you very much.
Great job. Great job. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all for coming.
Good night.
I'm going to hang on for a moment, Alan. Oh, Paul, did you want something? Oh, you're waving goodbye. Yeah.